Some of the kindest smiles I've seen came from the loneliest people I've known, and some of the calmest words were spoken by people hiding a storm inside. We live in a world of masks, smiling when we're tired, nodding when we want to scream, talking just to fill the silence. But what if I told you there are signs, soft ones, easy to miss, but impossible to fake? Have you ever looked back and asked yourself, how did I not see it? How did I miss the signs? The truth was right in front of me, but I didn't know how to see. In this video, we'll uncover 5 soul-level signs that reveal a person's true self, even when they're trying to hide it. This isn't about judging others. It's about protecting your peace and seeing with new eyes, not just out there, but within yourself too. If you've ever given your trust and ended up betrayed, you're not alone. You just didn't have the tools until now. So let me ask you, have you ever given too much to someone who never gave you the real version of themselves? If that question echoes in your heart, stay here with me, because it's time to begin. And the first sign, it's how someone treats the people who have nothing to offer them. 1. How they treat the people who can't do anything for them. What you do when no one is watching, that's who you are. You can tell a lot about someone, not by how they treat the powerful, but by how they treat the invisible. It's easy to smile at your boss, easy to compliment someone who might help you, easy to show kindness when there's something to gain. But the true measure of character is how a person behaves toward those who offer no reward at all. Emotional insight. Think about this. The barista who misspells their name. The janitor was quietly sweeping the floor. The receptionist who says, "One moment, please." The stranger asking for directions. To many, these people fade into the background, but to someone whose heart is awake, they shine with the same worth as anyone else. And here's the truth most people avoid. The way you treat someone who can't help you reveals exactly what you believe about yourself. In Zen practice, there's a phrase, your mind is revealed in the silence between actions. That silence, it is where you see if a person is operating from presence or performance. Those who carry inner peace do not need to posture. They don't treat others with kindness to be seen. They treat others with kindness because it's who they become. You'll notice something. Deeply insecure people often need to dominate someone just to feel like they exist. It might come out as sarcasm, impatience, a look of superiority. But beneath all of that, there's something fragile, a wound that says, if I can't feel powerful, I'll make someone else feel small. I remember eating lunch with a group of colleagues once. One of them, well-dressed, confident, praised by others, snapped at the waitress because she brought the wrong side dish. His words weren't loud, but they carried the sharpness of someone who needed to prove he was above her. The rest of the table stayed quiet, but I couldn't stop wondering, if he treats someone like this when it doesn't matter, how does he treat those closest to him when no one's around? There was another man, an older monk I once met in Korea. He barely spoke, but I watched him bow his head to the woman who cleaned the meditation hall every evening. He offered her warm tea, listened when she spoke, and thanked her as if she were his mother. When I asked him why he did that, he simply said, "Her presence keeps this space clean, outside and inside. Without her, our meditation would be cluttered with dust." I never forgot that, because it wasn't kindness for display. It was humility born of deep awareness. When you act with genuine care towards someone small, you're not just showing who you are. You're broadcasting a frequency, one that says, I see value in everyone. That frequency doesn't disappear. It echoes. It draws more kindness back into your life. It's not about karma points or spiritual credit. It's about resonance. The more you vibrate with compassion, the more life sends you experiences that reflect it. Many people confuse politeness with goodness, but politeness is often taught. Compassion is cultivated. One can say please and thank you and still walk past the suffering of others without blinking. So watch carefully. Notice the way someone looks at the grocery clerk, or whether they hold the door open for the next person. These little moments whisper more than any resume ever could. Ask yourself, do I acknowledge the people I pass by? Do I speak differently to a CEO than I do to a janitor? When someone beneath me makes a mistake, do I scold, ignore, or support? Every answer reveals your alignment, not with society, but with your soul. Tomorrow, choose to see the invisible ones, the ones people usually rush past. Say hello, smile, offer thanks, not to get anything, but because you've remembered something that many forget. We are all each other's mirrors, and sometimes the quietest soul sees you the clearest. And speaking of mirrors, there's another one most people ignore. It's subtle, it's powerful, and it might just be the clearest reflection of a person's soul. How they handle promises, especially when it's hard to keep them. Let's go deeper. 2. The promises they keep when it's inconvenient. Integrity isn't proven when it's easy. It's revealed when it costs you something. A person's word is not just a sound, it's a thread, either connecting hearts or unraveling trust. Most people don't break their promises with a loud intention. They simply forget, get busy, get distracted, and in the process, someone else is left waiting, wondering, hurting quietly. But here's something you already know in your bones. A small broken promise can echo louder than a big speech, and a quietly kept commitment can restore faith in humanity. Think about it. How many times has someone said they'd call back and didn't? How many, I'll be there at 5, turned into 5:45 without apology? How many tiny agreements got swept under the rug of life happens? Now turn the question around. How often have you done the same? This isn't about blame. It's about awareness. Because every time you keep your word, especially when it's inconvenient, you're shaping something far more powerful than just a reputation. You're shaping your alignment. In Zen tradition, the power of a word is sacred. A promise isn't a favor. It's a reflection of inner harmony. When your speech matches your intention and your action follows, you become trustworthy, not just to others, but to your mind. You begin to quiet that inner voice that doubts you, questions you, and second guesses every choice. Because now your actions are walking in the same direction as your truth. Years ago, I had a friend, kind, creative, and deeply private. One night she texted me, "Can we talk? Just a few minutes?" I saw the message, but I was tired. I told myself, I'll call her tomorrow. It's just one night. That call never happened. She passed away the next day, suddenly, quietly, alone. It wasn't just a missed call, it was a promise, even if unspoken, that I didn't honor. I've lived with that silence ever since, and I've made a vow. If I say yes, I mean yes. Even if it's hard, even if I'm tired, especially when it matters. Every time you honor your word, you reinforce a quiet, invisible structure within your life, like beams in a temple. Each small commitment you uphold strengthens the foundation of who you are becoming. And just as energy attracts energy, The more consistently you show up with integrity, the more you'll begin to notice others showing up that way around you. Not because you're demanding it, but because you're now vibrating at that level of wholeness. People who break promises casually often carry a fear of disappointing others. Ironically, by trying to avoid discomfort, they disappoint even more deeply. Others may overpromise because they crave approval. They want to be seen as helpful, available, capable, even when it stretches them too thin. But someone who speaks honestly, commits intentionally, and follows through quietly carries a kind of peace that's rare because they are not driven by ego, they are led by alignment. We often think that keeping a promise only matters when it's big, like a marriage vow, a business contract, a life-altering decision. But character is not built in grand moments. It's carved day by day in the smallest of acts, returning a borrowed book, showing up when you said you would, remembering the little things you agreed to, even when no one else will remember them, because in those moments, there is no applause, no reward, only the mirror of your integrity and the silence that reflects it. Ask yourself gently, have I become someone whose word carries weight? Do I stretch myself thin trying to please, only to leave trails of unkept intentions? Do I make promises to myself and then break them quietly? These questions don't judge you, they free you, because the moment you start honoring your word, you begin to restore trust not just with others, but with the deepest part of yourself. Today, revisit one small promise you forgot. Send that message. Return that call. Keep that quiet vow. It doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be real. Because the soul notices, even if no one else does. But what happens? When life gets chaotic, when things fall apart and pressure rises, when there's no time to plan, no room to think, that's when the next sign appears. Not in what someone says, but in how they pause. Let's talk about stillness and why it reveals more than any performance ever could. 3. Stillness, the language of the soul. The loudest truth is often spoken in silence. You learn the most about someone, not when everything is going well, but when everything is falling apart. Because when chaos hits, people either react or return to stillness, and that choice says everything. Think back to the last time life pressed you hard, a delay, an argument, a crisis, a moment where nothing went your way. Now ask yourself, did you breathe through it or explode into it? Did you pause or panic? Because stillness, not the absence of movement, but the presence of awareness, is one of the clearest signs of spiritual maturity. In Zen, we're taught that true calm is not achieved by escaping the storm, but by sitting in its center without flinching, not resisting, not grasping, just being, like the surface of a lake, unshaken by falling leaves. When someone has cultivated inner stillness, they no longer need to react to every shadow. They no longer need to defend themselves against every misunderstanding. Instead, they respond with presence, and in that pause, you can feel the depth of their soul. I once stood behind two people at an airport check-in counter. Their flight had just been canceled. Both were tired. Both had somewhere important to be. The first person raised their voice, demanded answers, slammed their fist on the counter. Everyone turned. The tension in the room thickened. The second person quietly stepped forward. They asked one simple question: what's the best thing we can do right now? No anger, no blame, just space. That space changed the energy in the entire line. And in that moment, it became clear. One person was fighting at the moment. The other was living with it. You see, how a person reacts under pressure is rarely about the situation. It's about what's unresolved inside of them. Those who haven't made peace with their past often carry it like firewood, waiting for the smallest spark to ignite them. But those who've done the work, who've sat with their darkness and learned to breathe through it, they become steady, not perfect, not emotionless, but steady. And this steadiness becomes a gift, not just for themselves, but for everyone around them. Stillness carries a frequency. It's not loud. It doesn't demand attention, but people feel it. You walk into a room and sense it. Like an anchor dropped on the ocean floor, it steadies the space without needing to control anything. And in a world addicted to speed, volume, and performance, stillness becomes magnetic. It doesn't chase, it attracts, not because it tries, but because it is. Years ago, I studied under a teacher who rarely raised his voice. Even when someone made a mistake, even when the room was noisy, he would simply pause, and the room would quiet itself. One day I asked him why he never reacted. He smiled and said, "If I react, I lose myself. If I stay silent, they find themselves." I never forgot that, because I realized stillness doesn't mean you're weak, it means your roots run deep. Many people mistake stillness for indifference. They think silence means you don't care, or that pausing means you don't know what to say. But silence isn't the absence of care. It's often the presence of wisdom. Those who need to respond instantly with blame, defense, or anger are often the most disconnected from themselves. But those who can wait a breath, return to their center, and speak only when truth arises. They speak from the soul, not just for it. So ask yourself gently, when I'm misunderstood, do I rush to explain or do I listen first? When plans break down, do I tighten or soften? When I feel pain, do I lash out or lean in? These questions aren't about perfection. They're about presence. Because your reactions don't reveal the world. They reveal you. And the more you practice stillness, the more space you create for truth to emerge and for love to stay. Today, when something goes wrong, pause, just for a breath, before you reply, before you judge, before you react. In that breath, you might meet someone you've forgotten, yourself. And once you meet yourself in stillness, you begin to see others differently too, especially when they're hurting, especially when they need more than just words. That brings us to the next sign, one that binds soul to soul without force. It's not in what people say, but in how they feel with you, even when they can't find the words. Let's talk about empathy. 4. Empathy, the invisible thread between souls. You don't truly know someone until you see how they hold another's pain. Empathy doesn't raise its voice. It doesn't need a spotlight. It's quiet, soft, almost invisible. But when it's there, you feel it. And when it's missing, you feel even more alone. Empathy is not about having the right words. It's not about advice. It's not even about fixing anything. It's about this. I may not have the answer, but I'll sit with you while you feel the question. That's what people truly need. Not your solutions, not your certainty, just your presence. In Zen, compassion isn't something you give to another. It's something you realize already exists between you. It's the bridge that forms when you stop trying to understand someone with your mind and begin to feel them with your breath. To be present with another's suffering without turning away, without judging, without reaching for quick relief is an act of courage, because it asks you to put down your ego and pick up your heart. Imagine two people comforting a grieving friend. One says, "You'll be okay. Everything happens for a reason. Just stay strong." They mean well, but the moment becomes about control, about doing something. The other simply sits beside the friend. No rush, no words, just presence, maybe a gentle hand on the back, and that's it. No advice, no distraction, just space. Which one feels more healing? People often think empathy is about saying the right thing, but true empathy is about saying the real thing. And sometimes the real thing is silence. A nod, a deep breath, a whisper of, "I'm here." Years ago, a close friend lost her husband. I went to visit her at the hospital. I brought soup, I brought flowers, I brought every helpful thing I could think of. She didn't want any of it. At one point, she looked at me and said, "Can you just sit down? I don't need fixing. I need someone to stop fixing me." So I sat. For an hour, we said nothing. I just held her hand while she stared out the window. And later that week, she told me, "That moment meant more to me than all the messages, cards, and solutions." It was then I realized empathy isn't a gesture, it's a space. Most people avoid empathy, not because they don't care, but because they're afraid of not knowing what to say. Or worse, they're afraid that feeling another's pain might unlock their own. But here's the secret. Empathy doesn't increase pain. It transforms it. When we allow ourselves to witness someone else's suffering without turning away, we stop isolating our own, because the walls between your pain and my pain begin to dissolve. And suddenly we remember, we're not separate. We're just different reflections of the same broken open heart. Empathy carries a vibration, not just through actions, but through attention. The moment you become fully present with someone, you shift the frequency between you. Their breathing slows, their shoulders relax, their heart begins to trust again. Why? Because your energy has said, "You don't have to carry this alone." One of the most common missteps is trying to cheer someone up too quickly. Saying things like, "Look on the bright side. It could be worse. You're strong. You'll get through this." These phrases often come from discomfort, not love, from the need to fix pain, not feel it. But when we bypass someone's experience, we accidentally deepen their sense of isolation. So instead, slow down. Breathe with them. Let them be where they are, not where you wish they were. Ask yourself today, when someone I love is hurting, do I rush to speak, or do I slow down to listen? Can I sit with someone's tears without needing to explain them? Do I hold space, or do I fill it? And also this, when I am in pain, am I gentle with myself? Or do I judge myself for not being over it yet? Because empathy begins at home, and the way we hold ourselves teaches us how to hold others. Today, choose to be a space, not a savior. If someone opens their heart to you, don't try to fix the pain. Just hold it, gently, like a sacred thing. And if no one opens up to you today, then practice turning that gentleness inward. Say to yourself, "I don't need to be perfect today. I just need to be kind." Empathy opens the door to deep connection. But what happens when that door closes and someone speaks of others when they're not in the room? That brings us to the next sign, one that whispers the truth, not in public performance, but in private conversations. Want to know who someone truly is? Watch what they say when the other person isn't there to hear it. Let's continue. 5. What they say about others when they're not around. Words carry energy, and the ones spoken in secret reveal the loudest truths. It's easy to say the right things when everyone's listening, But what someone says when they think it doesn't matter, that's where the mask often slips. If you want to see someone's true heart, listen to how they speak about the people who aren't in the room. Character doesn't show up only in public behavior. It whispers through private words. The ones we think no one will hear or care about. Because behind closed doors, when the cameras are off, people reveal not just their thoughts, but their alignment, how they describe others when there's no reward in doing so. That's where the soul speaks clearly. In Zen practice, speech is considered sacred, not because of how eloquent it is, but because of how true it is, how clean it is. Words are not just sounds, they're ripples, sent out into the world, echoing back, often in ways we don't expect. Gossip, sarcasm, mockery. These are not harmless habits. They are distortions, pulling the speaker away from their center. I once knew a man who spoke with charm in every meeting. Polite, witty, well-mannered. Everyone liked him. But when we walked out of those meetings, his tone would shift. He would tear people apart with his words, the way they dressed, the way they spoke, even their families. It didn't matter whether they were kind or good. If they weren't useful to him, they became subjects of ridicule. And I'll never forget how it made me feel, as if everything we built in that meeting had just been poisoned, from the inside out. People often speak ill of others in private because it gives them a false sense of power, a momentary lift, a tiny thrill. But this high has a cost, because every judgment we speak aloud is rooted in a part of ourselves that's still afraid, still wounded. And when we project those shadows onto others, we never truly feel lighter, just more hollow. What do you say when someone isn't present? Forms the energy you send out into the world. And just like a boomerang, that energy doesn't vanish, it finds its way back. The more you speak with contempt, the more you'll find yourself surrounded by drama, tension, and mistrust. Not as punishment, but as a mirror. Because if you vibrate with poison, your life will begin to taste like it. Years ago, I made a quiet promise to myself. If I wouldn't say it in front of them, I won't say it at all. It wasn't easy, especially when others around me were gossiping, especially when I was angry or disappointed. But over time, I noticed something beautiful. I started trusting myself more, and others started trusting me too. Not because I was perfect, but because my words became a safe space. There's an old Zen story about a monk who tended a garden. He would speak to each plant as he watered it. "You are growing beautifully. You're safe here. Thank you for being alive." One day another monk asked, "Why do you talk to plants? They can't hear you." The gardener smiled. "It's not for them. It's for me. I want my mouth to grow only things I would gladly plant in the soil." Words are seeds, and sooner or later, we eat the fruit of what we planted. Sometimes we speak ill of others, not because we truly feel that way, but because we're afraid of silence, or because we want to bond with someone through shared negativity. But that kind of connection is brittle. It collapses when truth enters the room. Better to be the one who changes the conversation, who gently turns away from the shadow, who refuses to make someone else's absence a target. That's the kind of energy that heals a room, without ever needing to raise a voice. Ask yourself today, do I speak about people differently when they're not around? When I feel hurt, do I seek release through criticism or clarity through reflection? Can I disagree with someone and still honor their dignity? And perhaps most importantly, would I trust myself if I overheard my own words? Today, let your words become a sanctuary. Speak only what brings clarity, compassion, or calm. And if you catch yourself slipping, pause. No shame, No guilt, just a breath and a return. Because what you say about others echoes in how you feel about yourself. In the end, it was never about them. It was always about who you choose to be. So now we return to where we began. Not to the masks, not to the appearances, but to the soul underneath it all. We've explored 5 quiet signs, 5 doorways into someone's truth. How do they treat the ones with no power? How do they keep their word when it's hard? How do they remain still when chaos rises? How they hold your pain when you need presence? And how they speak when others aren't watching. Each one is a reflection. Each one a mirror. But here's what's most important. These signs aren't just for seeing others more clearly. They're for seeing yourself. Ask yourself now, not to judge, but to awaken. Do I treat the unseen with dignity? Do I show up when no one is clapping? Can I stay calm when life spins too fast? Can I hold space for others and for myself? Do I speak with kindness when no one's listening? Because the truth is, you don't need to wait to see these signs in someone else. You can begin living them right now. And when you do, something soft begins to open inside you. A peace, a clarity, a deep trust in your spirit. You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to get every word right. You don't even have to know what to say. All you have to do is a return to present, to honesty, to compassion, again and again, in small moments when no one is watching. Because of those moments, they become your life. They become your legacy. They become your light. The next time you look at someone and wonder, who are they? Pause and look again. Not with your eyes, but with your breath, your stillness, your awareness, because the soul speaks softly. But if your heart is listening, you'll always know the truth. If this message finds a quiet place inside you, share it with someone whose soul deserves to be seen. And if you'd like to keep growing with me, if you value depth over noise, presence over performance, and truth over trends, subscribe. Not just to a channel, but to a way of living, a way of seeing, a way of being, a way of remembering who you truly are.